Hear now the greatest story ever told from the Gospel of Luke. But on the first day of the week at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. So a lot has happened to Peter since the parade last week. Can I get an amen? A lot has happened. We talked a lot about it on Maundy, Thursday. Everything from the highs of being called and being told he's the rock of the foundation, but nothing more difficult than this week, where everything went wrong. He denied Jesus not just once, but 3 times. He engaged in violence on behalf of Jesus. He did everything but be faithful. I have to imagine it was the longest week of Peter's life, only to be finished with the torturous death of his own rabbi. At the hands of Rome, at the hands of the state, the one he called Messiah and the Son of God died on a cross. I have to imagine it was the longest Sabbath of Peter's life. This is where Peter thinks the story ends. He thinks this is the finish, until those women show up. Those women show up with their idle tale, with all the disciples dismissing them, ignoring the fact that the women were the first to remember, the first to believe, the first to proclaim the gospel and the good news. And they don't just do it in Luke, they do it in every one of the gospels. Can I get an amen? But as we have done for the last week, we have followed Peter faithfully week after week. And so Peter was Peter in this story, right? He has to be himself. He's the only disciple that even maybe considers that what the women were telling was the truth. And he runs to the grave to see for himself. Because Peter just doesn't know how to do anything halfway. He just can't help himself. He's not going to walk. He's not going to mosey. He's not going to contemplate. He's going to run. He's going to run to see if there is a possibility that this long, horrible week wasn't really the end of the story. That maybe there was more to the story of Jesus. Maybe there was more to Peter's story than failure and death. So this makes Peter's reaction when he sees the linens lying there, when the stone is rolled away, when there is no body in sight, all the more interesting. I like to think Peter kind of tells us how to react to the resurrection, because it has been the darkest week of his life. After all his denials, after all of his failings, after witnessing the crucifixion, Peter leaves the tomb and he doesn't feel guilty. He doesn't feel shame. Jerry and I talked about this week like the, Jesus is back. What does that mean for me? None of that. There's no, what did you say earlier? Oh, snap. Jesus is back. No, Peter doesn't feel any of those things. For once, Peter seems to grasp what God was doing. That maybe God could defeat death. That God could overcome the powers and the principalities of the time. That like God had done so many times before, as we sung about today, God could rescue us again. So of course, when he comes away from the empty grave, the only emotion you can feel when you see or witness resurrection is amazement. Just to be in awe of a thing we cannot fully comprehend, a thing we can't fully understand, and that's okay. That's not what's being asked of us in this moment, because there's no way, Peter doesn't fully understand yet, because none of us fully understand resurrection. Be a little nervous if somebody said they did, but he knows how to be amazed. He knows how to let God still surprise him. To remember that when we think something is gone, something is unsavable, something is dead, God saves us again. That when we fail and we deny and we disappoint, when there's no way out, God finds a way. According to Dr. Carolyn Lewis, she says, the resurrection only makes sense when we remain amazed, marveling and wondering at the love of God that reversed death itself. Our comprehension of the resurrection is not based on a cerebral understanding, but on our ability to embrace awe and to let it transform us from the inside out. This amazement of Peter, this awe of believing the women, meaning that he believes Jesus, I think it starts to transform him from the inside out. That he can start to believe and understand and become who Jesus said he was going to be. That he understands what it means to fish for people, what it means to offer healing to those who actually need it, that he understands what it might mean to preach good news to the poor and the persecuted, to the outsider and the neglected. And in his amazement, Peter does something he's not done at all during these 6 weeks. He's speechless. He doesn't say anything. That never happens to him. That's incredibly unusual for him. And I wonder, lots of things can leave us speechless. For him, it is this moment. But it makes me reflect back on the disciples that did not run, the disciples that did not believe, the ones that remained in the room hidden, that maybe they were speechless because of the suffering they had witnessed and endured. They weren't just being overtly sexist, they were overwhelmed. They were suffering too much. They had seen too much. And that overwhelm had blinded them to the possibility of hope. Blinded them to the idea that there was any way to be saved from that hopelessness. And I think when we only focus on the suffering, when we only focus on the darkness, it can immobilize anyone, even us. I think it's what can lead us to being cynical or jaded. When we forget that there is more than just what is dark in the world. For Peter, it is this resurrection that leaves him speechless because he can see the light. He stands in awe and in amazement, and it transforms him from the inside out. It transforms his shame and his guilt into hope. It transforms his grief and his loss into a celebration. It gives him a lens and a way of seeing to start grasping all that Jesus had done, everything that Jesus had taught, everything that Jesus had spoken about, everything that Jesus had protested, all who Jesus had healed. It made me think, I have to imagine that over the weeks that followed this, the weeks leading to Pentecost and to many other hard, challenging moments in Peter's faith, that he had to return to this moment again and again and again when his own awe and his own amazement started to fade or to wane. Would he close his eyes and try to remember what it felt like inside the tomb? How dark it was, Does he remember what the linens felt like in his hand? Was there a smell of death that should be there but wasn't? I have to believe he returns to this moment when it rushed into his body, when he could feel the truth happening in his body. What if I believed these women? What if what they said was true? What if this is real? To help him stay amazed and in awe. To help him remember all that God could do. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe you can stay in awe and amazement all the time. Maybe that's a place you can live and it's super easy. I need reminders. I need to be reminded all the time that just one worship service, just one time reading the story, I need it every week. Because like Peter, life can get hard. I can get disappointed. I also can screw up. I can deny, I can fail, and I can witness all the ways that the world fails around me. But the only way I know to not be immobilized by all of that, the anger or the fear or the disappointment, is to live like Peter in that awe and that amazement. I need to be told week after week after week that what Jesus said was true, that he would rise again, that death would not have the last word, not then and not now. I return to church because it is the place I go to be reminded that the resurrection is real. I get to experience it more often in community. I get to experience it because I'm in ministry, and that's just one of the luckiest parts of being the pastor. I get to do it with you. And if you don't know what resurrection looks like, let me help you. I have had the absolute sacred honor of hugging a mom whose grown son is recovered from opioid addiction. That's what resurrection looks like in real life. Can I get an amen? I have been with the person who came and told me that the cancer screen was entirely clear this time. Can I get an amen? I have seen people who have had to deal with loss and death year after year after year get surrounded by love in ways they never imagined. By neighbors, by this community, by other communities, and they understand what it means to live again in spite of death. Can I get an amen? And in this place, we say all children are our children, right? And y'all were like, we don't need 11 weeks to raise enough money for these backpacks. You guys were like, no, we're better than that. As Patty told us, we can do it in 6 weeks. Not only can we do it in 6 weeks, we can go 10 over. Because all children are our children. All children deserve life more than death. And we want to participate in that. When that happens, I get to be amazed. When I get to hear those stories, I get to be in awe. I'm reminded again and again that resurrection is real. That what those women said was true. And I believe that's what church should be. A place to bear witness again and again and again just how real resurrection can be. A place to come and celebrate that even in the face of great darkness, God can always shine a light. Let me be clear, the resurrection doesn't deny the crucifixion. It was the epitome of what power and violence can do in the world and of what humanity is capable of. The resurrection is a reminder that God can still save us in spite of it. That God can bring what we thought was dead back to life. And sometimes that might even be us. It reminds us that the darkness and the light both exist, but when I come here, when I hear this story, when I hear the stories of God, when I listen to the teachings of Jesus, I am reminded that the light is still winning. Can I get an amen? When I listen to the voices of truth, they tell me it is real. They tell me it is true. A lot happened to Peter this week, y'all. He saw the worst in himself and of what humanity was capable of, but he also learned that God saves us in spite of it. That his failings nor anybody else's cannot get in the way of God's abundant, overwhelming, powerful love. That nothing could break Peter's relationship to Jesus, not even Peter. That Jesus kept his promise, that he would make Peter a fisher of men. That whenever Peter was sinking, Jesus would save him by being with him in the storms of his life. That forgiveness would be in abundance, and that it was true, that Jesus was the Son of God. He was the Messiah. Of course, Peter left the tomb amazed. How else do you respond to God's amazing grace? May it transform you from the inside out.